So, I'm going to be talking about a section of the game after you get Paula, after you get Jeff, and right after you defeat Master Belch. And you'll be in Saturn Valley, and one of the Mr.Saturns will ask you, do you want some coffee, pretty much? And I don't know what the coffee is. I don't know if it's something different or if it's actually just coffee, but hey, whatever. And when you drink this coffee, at least the player, or I guess it's supposed to be going on in Ness's mind, maybe, just what he's thinking, happens. And it says some very, I would say some fairly profound stuff in some regards to, the happenings of Ness's adventure and what is to come. And the first thing I'm going to do is show you the full clip of this coffee break sequence. Just like with any clip that I show by itself, I kind of hope that anybody actually watching this does their own interpretation of what is being said and such and what is happening. Because, even though I'm mostly making these videos for myself to some regard, I don't want this to be one of those things where my interpretation is seen as the end interpretation, because that is definitely not what I'm going for, and that is definitely not the case. Throughout any of these things, any clips that I show, the reason I show them first is, without any commentaries, I want anybody watching to first do their own interpretations, and then when I do my own interpretations, just, you could say that, you could think that I'm wrong, or you could think that I'm close, or you think that or something like that. Do you think that I'm mostly right or mostly wrong? It doesn't matter. Just want you to do your own interpretations, obviously. Then I do mine afterward, and then just, hope that we both gain something from this in some regards. So I'll see you after this clip. So there's probably a lot that can be said about this part, but this is the part where I kind of start getting some kind of things that I can personally interpret, potentially. You have grown steadily stronger, though you have experienced the pain of battle many times. And it's sort of interesting with almost all RPGs to a degree, and JRPGs as well, or especially, I guess you could say, is the only way that you ever gain any experience to get your character to level, and this is kind of explored in other games as well in the same genre to be a little bit more experimental with this, but it just kind of shows how interesting of a thing it is. And I believe there can be a lot of meaning that could be can be construed from this. Is the only way that you gain, your character gains in strength is through experience, just as I would say that most people, the only way they really gain in this avatar and possibly spiritually as well to some degree is through experience. But in these games, the only way that you really do that for the most part, some of them are, like I said, more experimental with it, but for the most part is battling enemies. And as it says, experiencing the pain of battle. While this is more obviously in the literal sense, your Ness and his party are literally fighting enemies with their person. I would say that it's similar to ourselves in that the only way we really gain much is through the more so we gain through the more painful experiences, kind of like the more difficult tasks, the more taxing things, the more I guess you could say just generally like the more painful, less enjoyable things, and to some degree, like as Matt sometimes says, would you really gain much if all day, every day, all you did was get jerked off, lubed up, and then jerked off 20 times a day and nothing else changed? That's all you did always. It was always pleasure. It was always pleasures of anything, any kind of pleasures. And really the most that you gain is when you, not from that, but when you experience the pain of, rejection from anything, rejection from people, rejection from society, rejection from your beliefs, your previous beliefs or whatever, the pain of cognitive dissonance to some degree, like believing one thing and then realizing that maybe that thing is not the right thing and you're not sure which way to go or whatever, you're not sure which way to believe. To a degree, those are all not enjoyable experiences, and for me at least, I would gain the most when I started doing things that were difficult to do, like when I started first fasting and stuff. Like at first, it is a very, I wouldn't say like an agonizing experience, but it is a pretty painful experience in some ways. Like some nights my chest would be in pain. Some nights I would be in just not really general pain, but sometimes I would just have things that I was not used to. And I didn't get scared per se, but I just had to power through it. And it always worked out in the end. And it always worked out to my benefit, I would say. And just learning to overcome these difficult experiences and then learn from them. And another one for me was realizing that something like as seemingly benign as just taking a cold shower, like an ice cold shower, I would never do that normally, but then I said, you know what, I want to try it. Just jump in the shower when it's ice cold, stay in there the whole time ice cold, do your whole thing. And it was extremely physically shocking at first, and it was something I'd never really, just as bad as I guess is jumping into a cold pool pretty much, like, cannonballing into a cold pool or something. But then I realized when I got out after the whole thing, well, for one, it would get much easier as I was in there. I stayed in there. But when I was getting out, I was like, wow, even though this is so hard to initially do, this feels so much better than taking a normal, comfortable hot shower the whole time. Like, when you get out, you feel refreshed, you feel really good. Now, I don't necessarily say that I'm doing that every time, but when I did, I was like, wow, this is, like, surprisingly a beneficial thing I could see. This could help a lot of people if they did this more, instead of being averse to it right away. And even a more minor thing that I also did was I kicked my habit that I used to have of biting my nails and fingers all the time. Like, I used to have, like, no nails, pretty much, or no, like, white part of my nails, whatever you want to say. And I would just, every time I would be daydreaming or something, I would be biting my nails constantly. And it just took a few weeks of determination and willpower and going through this to eventually just kick the habit completely. And it was, for me at least, so much better to not do this. Like, I still have other bad habits here and there, but that was especially a big one for me that was prevalent, and it was totally worth going through the quote-unquote pain and suffering to get through that. And the same thing I could see here to a degree in a more literal sense with the battle. Like, that's the only way that they get stronger, is going through that pain. In this part, Ness, as you certainly know by now, you are not a regular young man. You have an awesome destiny to fulfill. I see this kind of like just ourselves in the same way, is we realize we are not regular people anymore. We are not regular people, or we're not regular people anymore like we used to be, maybe. That's obviously, some people would say that is like arrogant in some ways, I guess you could say, but I think a lot of us don't really care about that kind of label anymore. It's like, hey, we realize we're not the same as other people, and we're not regular. We don't want to be regular to a degree. Unless you want to be Cypher or whatever, you want to go back to being that way, which I really, deep down, I don't think people really believe that, I would say. But we know we're not regular, and we're never going to be regular like this society has other people become or stay. We're not going to be like that anymore. In this part, you have an awesome destiny to fulfill. And I'll get more on this at a later time with another topic where this kind of comes more into play, but I've been becoming more and more aware of maybe not so much the fact, but maybe I'm making this myself, I don't know, that we don't really have as much quote-unquote free will as we might like to think we do. And I also think that it's kind of silly that we think that that's necessarily a bad thing, I guess you say, that we don't really have as much free will as we think, or as we would like to believe. I'm starting to think more and more that just as this whole kind of reality seems like it's playing through a script, that we kind of have our own script in the same way, in that we're playing a role. We're playing a role as a character, almost as our own character in some way, in this grand play to a degree, where our script is our destiny or whatever. Like, it might feel like free will to some degree, but then there's so many other times where it really does feel like things are just kind of deterministically happen to us in some ways. It's, like I said, I'm going to get more into this, but this is kind of what I'm starting to realize more for myself, at least. The journey from this point will be long, and it will be more difficult than anything you've undergone to this point. Now, while that might be true, in terms of thematically what he's going to be facing eventually and in the future after this point of the game, is, yes, it is much more difficult than anything that he's gone to that point. But ironically, in the actual gameplay, it is pretty much after this point mostly going to get easier, which is kind of funny, I guess. But anyway, I'm not sure, some people would say that for their own journeys, I don't know what points that they would say it's been the most difficult. As I was saying in the previous episodes, I would think that the most difficult would be the first step of going through this, because you really have to break down your entire reality that has been constructed for you up to that point. And that, for most people, is extremely difficult, traumatic. It's not easy at all. And I would say it is still always difficult as we're going through this, but I'd say that it does get easier to some degree, even though there are many things that catch you along the way as well. So, yeah, depending on, your mileage may vary on that one. When good battles evil, which side do you believe wins? Do you have faith that good is triumphant? Now, this is kind of one of those duality things, obviously, is good and evil, and everybody has their own kind of ideas and feelings on this one. Is like, is there really good and evil? But most people, I think, do feel that there is some kind of quote-unquote objective good and objective evil kind of things. Like, I think most people really do feel within them when something is either good or bad or wrong or not, to some degree at least. It's interesting how this is worded. When good battles evil, which side do you believe wins? Do you have faith that good is triumphant? And it almost asks that like it's kind of on that idea that we create, like, the reality to an extent is a reflection of ourselves, that we create us believing something or whatever, us thinking something actually creates it to a degree. So almost what this is saying, and this theme is even in the later games, the next game of this to a big extent, I've noticed, is the side that you believe, good or evil, whichever, is really the one that will win no matter what, is because you're the kind of reflection of this place that you reside in, if that's, what you want to go by. And what you do or do not believe is what triumphs in the end. Like, which side do you believe wins? Do you have faith that that blank is triumphant? And if you do not have faith, then it will not be the case. But if you do, if you believe, then it will be the case. That is what you will create. That's how I interpret this, at least in a way. One thing you must never lose is courage. If you believe in the goal you strive for, you will be courageous. So, kind of what I just said before in a way is like, one thing that you will never lose is your courage. And if you believe in what you are striving to do, or what you are striving to become, the reality that you reside in or whatever, you will be courageous, or you will be successful in that. That thing will be the case. That will be the reality then. There are many difficult times ahead, but you must keep your sense of humor and work through the tough situations and enjoy yourself. Now, this one I believe is pretty important to what this kind of is saying, like, and we always say this, like this is always something that is said, is obviously there are many difficult times ahead for everybody. It's no matter what you're doing, that's the only way to go forward, is to go through those difficult times. But you must keep your sense of humor. So I'm a heavy believer of this as well, that it's like, if you're one of those, I've seen so many of these people online, and it does make me sad for them to a degree, is like, wow, I would hate to live in that kind of world that you have created for yourself in some way. The doom and gloomers, the doomers, whatever. Everything they take so seriously. Like, they see, I know you can't just laugh at every single thing to a degree. Maybe you can. I mean, I try to, for the most part, but these people, they take everything so seriously in this reality. Like, they take the reality so seriously, and they take themselves so seriously in this reality. And really, I can see it's to their detriment. Like, every little thing that they're just like, it's the end of the world, or it's never going to be the same. I don't want to be here anymore. I don't want to live here anymore. And it's like, if you just laugh at it, it just becomes nothing. Like that, like whatever, some news about, I don't know, shutdowns in some place. Like, it's funny with these people, if they're not even living there to a degree, I just look at it like, how is that affecting you? And then you could say, well, what if it comes to you? Well, then if it ever came here, then you just be like, hey, whatever. I'm not gonna follow your stuff. I'm not gonna worry about it. It's like, hey, I'm just gonna live the way I have been to a degree. Like, I don't know. I just look at that. People do take this place, their own places, way too seriously, and then it's completely to their detriment, to their harm, and it doesn't help them in their progression at all. From what I see, when you laugh at something, you stop taking it seriously, and you can just go back, really far back, and just realize how ridiculous it is to a degree, and how ridiculous it would be to take it so seriously, and work through the tough situations and enjoy yourself. And it's like, you know, kind of like that saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. It's like, just work through all these difficulties and tough situations and enjoy yourself. Like, if you don't enjoy yourself, or if you don't to some degree just deal with the situations and laugh at it or whatever, and yes, and enjoy yourself as well. Like, if you don't live, I would say that's on what that is like living. If you're not enjoying yourself, you're not really living. And that's a problem that so many people have, is that they are quote unquote existing, but they are not living. And I think it's because they don't enjoy themselves, and they don't try to make themselves enjoy. They just work their crappy job, even though they hate it with all their heart. They keep doing it, and then realize later, like, man, I just wasted my entire life here, my entire experience here, doing that crap, when they could have been doing something else. Even if it wasn't the normal way to do these things, they weren't courageous, and they didn't take that risk or whatever. It's not even a risk, because if you don't believe that this body has much say besides in this reality, like, it really isn't a risk. It's a risk to your normal, to your idea of normal. That's just how I look at it. Like, if you're not striving to make yourself enjoy your life, this experience here, then you're not really living. That's how I look at this. And this last part is kind of interesting if you read into it. Like, initially you would think maybe Ness is talking to himself almost. And maybe it is. Like, I wish you luck. So, who's talking to them? Who's talking to Ness? And I guess you could say maybe this is his true self talking to him. And I could totally see that one. So, that's what I would interpret that as almost. So, that's the end of this video for now. I think that section was a very interesting part, for considering how, it was only like 4 minutes, that whole entire little thing. But I think it had, just like Buzz, it had quite a lot to say and be interpreted from it. So, once again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.